Hi, my name is Mary Jordan. I'd like to welcome you to this episode of Springdale Today. Joining us today is Springdale High School Law and Public Safety Academy's teacher, Marjay Hignite, Springdale High student, Marcela Mendez, and Washington County Election Commissioner, Jennifer Price. Today we'll be discussing how district bilingual students are helping to empower voters at the polls, as well as some of the barriers that voters who speak English as a second language may face. So thank you. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Thank you all for being here today.
Gordon.
Now, I'm curious. So I don't often think of a school district as being the one to maybe provide such a really huge responsibility, right? So how did the relationship between the school district and Washington County come about?
So when I first started this job, I had a poll supervisor who became a civics teacher at Fayetteville High School. And when she transitioned from being a poll worker to a civics teacher, she asked me, is there any way my students can volunteer at the schools? And I said, oh my gosh, I think that is a great idea. And so for the first couple of years that we did it, the students really couldn't do a whole lot. And then it was around 2017, we actually got a law passed that allowed students who trained as poll workers to actually be able to work as poll workers and do assisting. And so we connected through Springdale High because we had done a couple of different things at the school. We did one of the school district's student council elections one year. We brought in all the voting equipment. So we've kind of been familiar with Springdale High and kind of just, talking to students about the importance of voting. And then when this ability for the students to actually work as poll workers, and you had all of these wonderful students where they were bilingual, I thought this is a win for Washington County to get these students involved in the voting process, but also give us access to having poll workers who are bilingual at the polls.
Well, and Marjay, have you been involved with this from the beginning?
Yes, since the law was passed, the Law and Public Safety Academy has been providing volunteers every 2 years. They work primaries, they work the major elections, and it's just a really cool experience for the students. I actually just had a student message me that she's an adult out in the world, but she said, Miss Hignite, I just voted my first presidential election, and I went back to the polling place I volunteered at. I feel like my life's come full circle. So I thought that was really cool.
That is really cool. And what kind of opportunities did you think that this might serve for our students when you first became involved?
Well, they always want a way to serve in the community, and they love doing things that feel like they have value and make a difference. And even the kids who aren't bilingual but are there working as poll workers, it makes them feel like they're a part of the process. And then for the bilingual kids, it's a totally different experience because they are there for something even more important, to just make people feel welcome, make all of our citizens feel like they are there to vote and their vote matters.
Marcela, that was kind of a toss to you then, right there with it. So why are you volunteering at the polls as a translator?
Because personally, it's such a personal matter to me, because I always grew up translating for my parents. I was always there to help them out. So when this opportunity came up to do that for parents that may not have their kids with them, that meant a lot to me, because every time my mom is out going about running errands, doing stuff like that, I always hope that someone is there helping her and treating her well. And I want to be that for someone's parents. I want to be that for someone's grandparents, someone's uncle, aunt. So I just wanted to make an impact in my community.
Well, it sounds like you are. How many years have you been volunteering?
I'm coming up on 1 year.
Very good. Have you had a chance to vote yet?
No, unfortunately. Still 17.
Oh, okay. So, but do you think that this experience at all has kind of helped you be motivated for that in the future?
Oh, yes, of course. I've always grew up always having the idea of I'm going to be civically engaged when I turn 18. I'm always going to be paying attention to what's going on in the world. And this is an opportunity for me to be kind of engaged, but being engaged with my community. Yeah.
Great. Well, and Jennifer, what kind of need exists within Washington County and Northwest Arkansas for translators at the polls?
Yeah, we've definitely have seen that need grow. When I first started, I would get feedback from my poll workers when we would do training about what did they need at the polls. And number one was bilingual poll workers. And it had been really difficult for me to find bilingual poll workers. And so over the years, we definitely have developed a program where we're using the high school students as translators. We've been able to get regular poll workers who are bilingual as well. And then we have certain documents translated into Spanish as well, because there's a lot of questions that are asked at the polls, and we want everyone to feel comfortable. And so we've seen definitely over the past years that growth in this area, the need for it. And I do anticipate that possibly in 10 years, we may be federally mandated to have ballots in both languages. And so I feel like this is just a jump start on that federal mandate that we may receive one day. So we'll be ahead, when we get those directions.
Do you have any information on what percentage of voters may be impacted by speaking a second language, English as a second language, or perhaps how many languages might be spoken?
So I know that when you hit that threshold, it's 10% of the population that is mainly that is their first language. And so we're not quite there yet in regards to population, but we see it enough at the polls. We get that question asked that we feel it's important, even if it's just one voter. Having that voter have true access at the polling location by being able to communicate with us is so important. And this is not just for voters where English is their second language, but there's other areas as well for voters who may be visually impaired or hearing impaired. All of those kind of things we have to think about when we're talking about access to the polls.
Right. And schools are a good reflector of the community too, Marjay. So what does the ESL population look like within our schools? Do you have any information on that?
I believe in the Springdale School District, we have 8,000 ELL students, and we also have another 4,000 that have graduated the ELL program that we're still following and serving. So 12,000 out of 20 plus thousand.
So that's pretty significant.
Yes.
If a school district does mirror the community in which voters reside, then I guess it's pretty significant. So, Marcela, what can you tell me about the language you speak? Is it Spanish? Or
Yes, ma'am.
And what did that look like for you within your household and growing up?
It was always integral. It was always integral because there's always that fear of losing that aspect of my culture. But I feel like with having opportunities like these, I feel like I can embrace that aspect of speaking Spanish at home and reflecting that and being able to be a source of comfort or a source of being able to make people feel more comfortable voting and being able to just access the polls, I feel is very important.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you were in a Spanish-speaking household growing up, did you see any situations with your parents or family members where you found it was really necessary for you to be there as a translator for them?
Yes, definitely. Doctor's appointments, translating at the pharmacy, maybe translating bills, stuff like that was always something that I always felt like I needed to be there. If my siblings were in there, I felt like I needed to be there to translate. And even if I didn't know, I always tried my best because I knew that I was helping them gain more access and than me not being there.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah. Now, Jennifer, you touched on it just a little bit. What can you share with us about English-only ballots at the polls?
Yeah, so right now our ballot is only in English. But there are other states, and sometimes in a state, maybe just one county, that's mandated by federal law to have their ballot in multiple languages. Especially in California, you can see ballots in 10, 15 different languages. And so, there is a very good possibility within 10 years that in Washington County, we'll probably see ballots both in Spanish and in English. And so kind of for us at this moment, we think about, well, what can we do? We know the ballot is not going to be in English, but what supplemental materials can we have that are translated into Spanish? So we worked on the check-in procedures, the questions every voter is asked. We worked on having the issues translated into Spanish, and then what is called a notice of election, which is essentially the full ballot with all the candidates, the races, the polling locations, all of that information translated into Spanish so that that materials are available when a voter comes into the polling location.
So language is being a very obvious one, but are there any other barriers that people who do not speak English as a second language might face at the polls?
So a lot of times, and we've seen this, and I've had this more this year than I've ever seen it before, is voter registration, getting voters registered to vote. And that is always kind of where we feel like maybe there's a lack of communication in regards to that. We've had several voters who have come in who were just naturalized as citizens and so excited to have that first opportunity to vote, but they weren't registered to vote. And I think that they're, making sure that we do get them registered to vote, making sure that, along with the naturalization also comes getting registered to vote. So we see it there as well this year in particular, because we know there have been in this area more and more, naturalized citizens living here.
Now, Marcela, you've been volunteering for about a year now. What kind of situations have you run into where you really felt like you were really serving somebody by being able to speak Spanish and English and translate for them?
Currently, that has not occurred yet, but knowing that I am there, just in case, just how Ms. Price had mentioned, that even if it's just one, or if the scenario doesn't come about, I know that I'm there just in case. It's so important because so many people that don't speak English are highly discouraged from going to places that they think, oh, maybe there's no one that speaks Spanish there, or oh this or oh that. I'm just glad to know that I'm there just in case if anything happens.
Mm-hmm. I imagine, Marjay, that the polling places are delicate places. Like me as media, there's very specific rules that I have to abide by when I'm there. And I imagine there's a very fine line between helping voters and maybe crossing a line. What are students allowed to do and not do when they're at the polls?
They pretty much are allowed to do the check-in process. And then if somebody has a very specific question, and they can give a straight translation with it, but they're not allowed to explain anything. They can't explain what a representative does. They can't explain what your senator does. So they can't go into explanation. They really are just there for straight translation.
So even the comprehension, right? The comprehension's not okay. All right. So now, how are you training students for this? What does that look like for them?
I'll let you do it because Jennifer does all the training.
So the students come and attend poll worker training. It's a condensed version of what our traditional poll workers do. So they learn the check-in process. They learn to ask the questions, do you have approved photo ID? State your name, address, and date of birth, and how to match that into the poll book. So they learn all of those procedures. They actually got to vote on the voting equipment so they could see how that works. And then, placing their ballot in the ballot box as well. So when we did our training, we had everything set up just like it would be in a polling location. And so once they've attended that, then that qualifies them to become a poll worker.
Very good. So as far as the future of this program, you going ahead, do you imagine doing anything more or different in the future?
My plan is to keep continuing. I think this is a wonderful partnership. I think it benefits both the students, but also the community here in Washington County.
Have you seen benefits for you being able to be involved, Marcela?
Yes, of course. It's just it impacts me how much this program has gotten so many students engaged with their community, because there was not a lot of opportunities that I was aware of before I started doing this one, and it offers such a great experience to be able to see how it all works before you go and vote, and it's just a great impact on the community overall.
Mm-hmm. Marjay, about how many people actually serve as translator? How many students serve as translators?
We've got 39 kids that were trained this year, and I would say probably all but 6 are bilingual. So almost all of them speak more than one language, whether it's Spanish, Marshallese, Laotian. Trying to think of what other. Those are the 3 I can think of right now.
Yeah. And what have you observed as you've watched this program start and grow and students experience it? What have you seen as far as, the short and long-term impacts of this program?
I think, I see the kids seeing the relevance of it in their lives, that every vote matters and their voice counts, that even if sometimes the world is like, oh, this isn't that terribly important, when they get to be there and see people come in and people are excited to vote and they get to be a part of the process and help them through it, they grow up to be citizens who want to vote and want to make their voice heard, which is my favorite thing about it.
Mine too.
Jennifer, is there anything else that you think that we really need to be sure that we communicate to voters or voters who speak English as a second language?
We want to encourage everyone to come vote, and I think that has been definitely what this program has helped us, especially in the Springdale area, is making sure that those voters feel welcome at the polling location. And accessibility is so important. Because if voters do feel intimidated or unsure of the process, they're less likely to come and vote. And so by developing this program, working with the students, getting them involved has definitely helped all of us.
Now, I learned something new the other day in that I guess it's no longer a factor that you have to go to a select polling location. You can now vote regardless, as long as you're registered in that county to vote. Is that accurate?
That is correct. We do what is called vote centers, which allows voters to go to any location as long as you're registered to vote in that county. But what we've found is that the majority of voters tend to go to the exact same place. The biggest thing that law allows us, when you have an address change, it doesn't require you to go to a different polling location, because we know voters are less likely to do that. So the vote centers is also another way of making voting more accessible, because it doesn't require voters to change locations just because their address changed.
Well, I know, finding out that this year I'm going to leave work and go to the Springdale Library and vote, even though I live in Fayetteville. So it did make it more accessible, and it's making it more feasible for me to vote as somebody who works as well.
Yes, it's great.
What about you guys? Anything to add, Marcela or Marjay, that I haven't thought to consider that you really think is important to mention as part of this conversation?
I just really believe that it's very important to highlight the impact this has had on our community, because we have a growing population of people who speak more than one language or just don't speak English at all. And this opportunity works both ways. It helps us as students to see how the voting place works, gets us excited to be civically engaged and just be a beneficial member of society. And it goes the other way. It helps us engage with people in our community and helps us to serve them and be able to just be there for them in case you just need anything.
Can I just tell a sweet story?
Please do.
So the poll workers, like my mom's a poll worker for the very first time this year, and she was so excited. And a lot of the poll workers are retired folks because it's easier to fit it into your schedule. They just are. And I just think it's really sweet because the high school kids go and they're kind of terrified if they haven't been before. They're a little nervous to just walk into a place and introduce themselves and then be a part of it. But it's always by the end, they almost come out feeling like they've got this extra set of grandparents for a day.
Oh, yeah.
Because they've just had the sweetest, like, people being nice to them, and they have nice conversations that are intergenerational. And that's like one of my favorite things also, outside of obviously the civics of it all, is just to see these kids connect with these folks who are retired and they share life stories, and it's kind of beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It is. I don't know if I can delve into this too much, but it was so nice talking to some ladies down in Tawny Town. It was before I had gone to Girls' State, and I was telling her, oh, I'm going to Girls' State, and then she had told me that she had gone to Girls' State a couple decades ago. And I was like, oh, that's, and seeing that parallel was so nice to see. It was just really nice to see that.
I bet. Now, what is Girls' State for those of us who aren't familiar with it?
Girls' State is a program that helps people, helps girls around the country be more civically engaged and learn more about the government.
Thank you so much for being here. We're so grateful that you guys are here. This is such an important conversation to have, and we're really grateful for everything you guys are doing to serve our communities and our families. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And thank you for joining us for Springdale today. I'm Mary Jordan, and I look forward to talking to you next time about what's happening in Springdale today.
Springdale Today is a production of Springdale Public Schools Communication Office.
The podcast is hosted by Mary Jordan and is produced and edited by Micah DeLacy.
Be sure to subscribe to Springdale Today for free on your favorite podcast platform.
And don't forget to follow Springdale Today on social media for episode updates and behind-the-scenes conversations.
Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us in the future
as we continue to learn about the amazing stories happening in Springdale today.